Welcome explorers to the Pechorsk security zone. As the release of Into the Radius 2 draws near, I would like to take you on a journey through this fascinating world full of wonder and horror, in the hope to convey to you why this is not only one of my favorite VR games of all time, but also why you should be excited about the upcoming sequel. Gear up, grab your detectors, and let's head out into the Radius.
Help me, please. I'm trapped somewhere terrible. I don't know where, just that it's dark here, and I can't move.
Explorer 61, under contract of the UNPSC, tasked to scout the exclusion zone for artifacts and research materials that could lead to a better understanding of the nature of these strange phenomena occurring in the wake of the asteroid strike in the Pechorsk area. They tell you that you can't leave. They tell you that your body altered in some way and will deteriorate and die out in the normal world. They could be lying. The only contact you have is through recordings and notes. Who knows if there even is an outside world? Who knows if there ever was one? As a fledgling explorer, you start out with a very low security clearance, having only access to the most basic equipment. By completing missions, you can increase your security level, giving you access to more and better equipment, allowing you in turn to progress deeper into the more dangerous areas of the zone. But you don't have to rely on the mission terminal and the shop alone. A lot of useful and/or valuable gear can be found out there. The first comparison for Into the Radius is always STALKER, and it is obvious that both games draw their main inspiration from the same source, the science fiction novel Roadside Picnic. Gameplay of Into the Radius though is much closer to that of an extraction shooter like Escape from Tarkov, minus the PvP. Your security level would be the equivalent of your trader reputation. The economy relies mainly on you going out into the zone to extract as much valuables as possible to sell or to use yourself. But that is where the comparison to an extraction shooter ends. If you die in the zone, you will drop your stuff, but it persists, so you can go out again and get it. I like to play on Iron mode, which prevents manual saves, but in normal mode you can even save your game at any point during your excursions. Still, the main gameplay loop is pretty much that of an extraction shooter. You go out on excursions, grab as much loot as you can, complete a trader quest or two while you're at it, and try to get back safely to base with your loot. You can find all forms of gear like flashlights, grenades, weapons, ammo, magazines, usually in pretty bad shape, but you can clean and repair. We'll get to that a bit later. Then there are research notes of scientists who were studying the zone but perished. These are basically just vendor trash. They are valuable to the UNPSC though, as they help understand the nature of the zone. And then there are artifacts, which are usually in clusters of anomalies, and you'll need special equipment like a detector, probes, and often also a gas mask to be able to retrieve them. Some artifacts have use, most are just for selling, but they are quite valuable. While there are no other players around like in a typical extraction shooter, the zone is still a very dangerous place. For one, there are anomalies that come in a variety of different forms and lethality. Most of them you can trigger by throwing a probe at them so you can see their impact area, but be careful, some anomalies don't like to be probed. The biggest threat of the zone are the entities though. Enemy variety is not huge, but big enough considering that all enemies have very different behaviors and require different strategies to take down. The spawn scuttles along the ground at a high pace, which makes it very difficult to hit. It will leap at you when close enough. If it misses, it gets disoriented for a second, and that is your opening to take it down. The Phantom is not very dangerous. It moves slowly and can only attack from a close range, but the darker variant leaves a remnant, which you'll have to destroy or it will respawn. The slider moves only by teleporting and stays still for a brief moment between ports. That is your chance to dump your magazine into it. Don't let it come close, it's very lethal. Then there is a BTR, if you so much as hear it in a distance. Hide. If it spots you, run. Run like you never ran before. The most common enemy though are the mimics, called thus because they try to mimic human form and behavior. They come equipped with a range of different weapons, each with their own distinct behavior patterns. Make no mistake, these are formidable foes. They have better aim and better reflexes than you, so be careful. Keep quiet, stay in cover, and you might survive the encounter. They even try to imitate speech. If you are lucky, they will just creepily whisper, "Where are you?" If you are unlucky, they imitate children's voices or even begin to sing. This is, hands down, the creepiest shit I have ever experienced in a video game. The zone consists of several open areas that you can freely explore. You'll usually have an objective, or 2 or 5 to pursue. You can go out without a mission, but you'll most likely not do that very often. Despite the objective being marked on the map, this is very far away from being a typical map marker game. There's a very heavy emphasis on exploration, and it's exploration done right. There are very distinct landmarks, like everywhere, and there will always be something interesting or worthwhile to find. I usually focus my exploration around areas where I can also complete a trader quest, but yeah, the main focus here is the free exploration of the zone. Scattered around the zone are these black silhouettes that at a distance can easily be confused with mimics. When you shatter them, they'll sometimes reveal an echo from the past, reminding you that there were humans here once, living normal lives. But not only the silhouettes echo the past, other things and places also do. This is clearly inspired by the first 2 Metro games, but while in those games the flashbacks are audio-visual, here they are audio only. Maybe that makes it even scarier. You just don't get used to it. I get scared every single time, but heck, I even get scared at my own footsteps sometimes. When you kill enemies, they stay dead, so you get the very satisfying feeling of having cleared out an area and being able to loot and explore in relative peace. There are some spots that have limited respawns, but they are not too much of a hassle. That is, until the tide hits. The tide is a mechanic that governs the flow of the game in a major way. Every 5 days, in-game days, which are about 2 hours or so, the tide sweeps over the zone. It acts as a major reset, repopulating the world with enemies, shuffling around positions of some anomalies and redistributing loot, with a certain amount of randomization which loot spots will get repopulated after each tide. The tide adds a rhythm to the game. If you attempt one of the bigger story missions, you'll probably want to start right after a tide, as they often involve clearing bigger structures of enemies, and you'll want to make sure that you'll get through before every enemy on the map respawns. I actually like this mechanic a lot. Unlike your typical extraction shooter, you can create safe paths to travel that you can use for several excursions, which is great, but having the reset every so often makes sure that the zone always stays a dangerous and very scary place, as it should be. This is where I live. Got my collection of firearms here, most of them scavenged and polished up for use. I like to keep one of every type, don't ask me why. Here's my collection of artifacts. I could sell them, but I like to keep them as a souvenir. I'm a bit of a hoarder when it comes to ammunition. And I got some pretty busted up magazines here. I still have to go through to see which one I could still use. I got some of my rarer treasures here on the bedside table. And I got my guitar right here. Back at base, you'll turn in quest objectives and sell your loot. Weapons you find in the zone will usually be pretty busted. The gear you use will deteriorate over time as well. Poorly maintained weapons will jam more often and you'll have a bad time using them, so you'll have to maintain your weapons. If durability is in the red, they are too far gone. You'll have to repair them at a trader for a fee. To fix the yellow range, you'll need oil and a toothbrush. When they are in the blue range, you'll use ramrod and paper. I love the weapon cleaning mechanic. It sounds like busy work, like menial labor, and it is. And that's actually what makes it so satisfying. Each excursion into the zone is super tense, always. That never changes throughout the whole game. Doing some busy work like cleaning your guns or sorting your ammo is exactly the right change of pace after a hard-pounding day in the zone. I just wish the cleaning would work a bit better. The ramrod cleaning is fine, but the brush cleaning can be a bit too tedious and does not always work that well. I thus try to not let my guns run below blue. If it happens, I'll still do it. It's not that bad, and I love cleaning weapons I find in the zone. For my own collection or to sell, it's so satisfying seeing them gradually turn from this rusty mess into a spotless implement of murder. It would be even more satisfying if the cleaning worked better, but yeah, I still like to do it. Your magazines also deteriorate and you'll have to clean them. That might be a bit much. It would be okay if the brush cleaning worked better, but like this, I don't bother. I just don't do it. I repair them at the trader. I don't care. Speaking of the trader, the game has an absurd amount of different weapons to play around with. I'm about 50 hours in the game, from 1.5 playthroughs or so. You can probably beeline the main quest line a lot faster, but you can also very easily spend a lot more time in the zone than that. But even with my 50 hours, I only have touched a fraction of the weapons available. There are some weapons that you can find out in there, but most you'll have to buy, and they are quite pricey. The economy in the game is very carefully tuned. You'll spend a lot of money on ammo. Sometimes you'll be like, okay, every single shot costs me about 10 bucks. How will I manage to break even? You usually will. You will make a profit if you're somewhat careful with your ammo usage, but it won't be a huge profit. You'll have to pick and choose the weapons you want to buy carefully, and buying the weapon alone is probably only half the cost. You'll usually want to use the upgrade station to retrofit it with a rail system of your liking, or to add a silencer mount. Then you'll want to look at compatible attachments. You'll need magazines and the right ammo type. It's a whole thing. As a main weapon, I'm running the s.t.a.l.k.e.r right now. Might not be the best weapon in the game, but I found it and polished it up, and it did serve me well enough. I'm usually running it with a silencer, which is 100% busted right now. Be right back. Better. I got this 4x scope for mid-range encounters, and I got this green laser for like short-range encounters. As a sidearm, I'm running this Beretta M9, also running with the silencer, and I got this little red dot sight. The most recent addition to my arsenal was this Tiger rifle, which I use for a long-range engagement. I had it retrofitted with a Picatinny rail to fit this adjustable scope. That's like from a 7x up to 35, yeah, up to 35. I don't bother with the silencer for this one. I want to be very far away from the enemy when I use this bad boy. By the way, you have this stove you can use to burn things. I use it mainly for empty ammo boxes. Make sure not to accidentally throw in a full ammo box. Or do it, it's fun. While you are at base, time runs in real time, so you'll not have to worry about the tide. But if you sleep, time will progress, limiting the hours you'll have available until the next tide hits. But it will get rid of the night. And it's rough out there at night. You will get caught out in the night. It is going to happen, and it's fucking scary. At least early in the game. The big circle in the sky emits some light, so later in the game, while you get to areas that are closer to it, it never gets really dark. Into the Radius is a tremendous game, but it is far from being perfect. That is all the more reason to be excited about the sequel, because that would be a good opportunity to fix all the problems, right, CM Games? I mentioned earlier that I don't like the brush cleaning, but that is not the only annoyance you'll have to put up with. Sometimes you'll get stuck on the geometry, even the tiniest bumps can be insurmountable. That would be easy to fix, just give us a jump button, problem solved. I think the armor system could do with a bit of rebalancing. The armor deteriorates so fast and it is so expensive to repair that I just didn't bother. I played most of the game without armor because I couldn't afford the upkeep. Maybe that is how it's supposed to be, that you only use armor for the story missions, which tend to be a lot more difficult than the rest of the game. I don't know, I felt that the armor upkeep was too high. Also, the enemy armor, not a huge fan of that system either. At some point in the game, enemies begin to appear armored and your regular full metal jacket bullets do 0 damage against armored enemies, so you have to switch to armor piercing rounds, which do less damage but have a 90% chance to penetrate. That means that even with AP rounds, every 10th hit will still do 0 damage. I don't think that's a good system, to be completely blunt. There's no tactical consideration, just, oh, now we have armored enemies, I guess I'll buy AP rounds from now on. I would prefer a system where your full metal jacket bullets do reduce damage against armored enemies, not 0, and enemies maybe have weak spots in their armor that guarantee penetration. So that there's a bit of skill involved and a bit of a tactical consideration. Do I buy the cheaper bullets, but it's harder to do full damage with them, or do I buy the more expensive AP rounds, which will do less damage, but they do that damage every hit? I think that would be a more interesting system. Then, artifacts. There are a ton of different artifacts in the zone, but most of them are just vendor trash. There are 3 types of artifacts that have a use, but only one that is useful. There's the steps artifacts, which will trace the steps you take. This can be used to navigate through anomaly clusters, which always have a distinct path to get through, and with the steps artifact you can easily find your way back. I didn't use them because anomaly clusters are all pretty small and I found it easy enough to just memorize the path. Then there's the night vision artifact, which lets you see the environment in the dark. Pretty cool. Unfortunately, it does nothing to help with visibility of enemies, so yeah, kinda useless. The only useful artifact is the regen, which heals you and is far more potent than the healing stims of the UNPSC. Never, ever venture out into the zone without at least one regen artifact. So yeah, I'd like to see more useful artifacts. That's the gist of it. Oh, and I hate this weapon rack. It is the worst. I like that you can just put stuff on shelves wherever, but maybe having some sort of snap into a weapon rack like in Ghosts of Tabor, for example, in addition to that would be nice. The game does not look too great either. There are some good details. I love how dirty the screen of the mission terminal looks, for example, and it has this cool analog look. And I mean, the drab grey and brown tones do a decent job to set the solemn mood of the game. But the lighting is kinda off. There never is direct sunlight. Light is always very diffuse, so shadows shouldn't be that dark. Maybe that's a design decision. Clearly the laws of physics do not apply in the zone. No reason to believe that light would behave as expected, but I don't like it. We know that the sequel will look quite a bit better. That's something to look forward to. There are a lot of issues I have mentioned here that would be quite damning for any lesser game, but the core gameplay and the immersion of Into the Radius are so incredible that I'm willing to overlook all of it. I'm still going to point it out because CM Games listen very closely to community feedback. There's another point that would be quite damning for most other games, and that is the mission structure. The game has, I don't know, 10 or so main story missions that are a bit more involved, and then there's a handful of side missions, which for the most part are just fetch quests. Go there, retrieve that items, or clear yonder area from enemies. You'll have repeat side missions very quickly. You do the same ones over and over again with only objective locations changing. In the later part of the game you'll have to complete several of these side missions between each story mission. It's padding. Progress is basically gated until you complete a bunch of very boring fetch quests. Again, any lesser game would get torn apart for something like this. Why does Into the Radius get away with it? Into the Radius does not really need missions or quests at all. Every time I go out into the zone, it's intense, scary, exciting. It's all of this at the same time. Missions do give the game a bit of structure, but what the actual quest is, I don't really care. So I really didn't mind the padding. It gave me a reason to go out there again, and that is enough for me. There are a few aspects that make the game so... I struggle to find a word here. Let's go for real. There are a few aspects that make the game so real. The incredible atmosphere it manages to build, combining the creepy soundscapes, the echoes of the former world you'll hear and see in vague silhouettes, and the harsh realism of the game's systems. VR games in general have taken it upon themselves to walk back on quality of life features to make gameplay more immersive feeling. Into the Radius went all the way with this trend. Most VR shooters have some form of manual reload, but only a few go as far as this, where you'll have to manage single bullets, keep track if you have a round chamber, make sure you have spare magazines to fill up back in base or in the wilds. It is these systems that border on tedium that pull you into the game. You do not play Into the Radius. You live Into the Radius. It is not a particularly good life. It's scary, it's tedious, it's hard, but it is a hell of a lot more interesting than real life. Into the Radius gets a lot closer to actually being an alternative reality than any other game managed to achieve. For me at least. There are times, there are long stretches in fact, where I don't want to play it. Where I'm like, you know what, real life isn't that bad after all. But these times pass. The game is like a beacon that will draw you back in eventually. But I have seen pretty much everything you can see in the game. I have done pretty much everything you can do. And thus for me, the beacon's flame began to weaken. I have mentioned a few things here that I could see the sequel doing better, but to be completely honest, I don't really care. I don't care. All I want from them is to rekindle that fire, that it might shine bright and far again. See you in the radius.